At 78 years old, Ezra Harding finds himself reflecting on the strange twists his life has taken. Sitting in his office, overlooking the fall garden of his home in Conway, he contemplates the house he's built, both a symbol of his hard work and a reminder of the 50 years it took to get there. The house, with its 2 floors, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, library, conservatory, and swimming pool, is a product of his life's efforts. Every dollar he invested in it was earned through his labor. He was born to an ordinary postal clerk and a housewife who instilled in him the values of hard work and honesty. At 16, Ezra started working at a store selling restaurant equipment, where Bedford Sloan, the owner, recognized his talent and mentored him. After Bedford's death, Ezra took out a large loan and bought the business. His wife Agatha supported his decision, even though it was risky. They lived frugally in a small apartment, but Ezra worked tirelessly to expand the business, which eventually grew into Harding Industries, a leader in the food equipment industry. By the time Ezra turned 50, his company was the largest supplier on the East Coast. Agatha, a humble teacher, was always by his side. She passed away 6 years ago from cancer, fighting longer than expected, but ultimately succumbing to the illness. Ezra's son, Thaddeus, was born when they were in their 30s, and Ezra loved him deeply, perhaps too much. He gave Thaddeus everything: an elite education, his first home, and a management position in his company, despite his son having no real understanding of the business. Agatha had warned Ezra that he was doing his son a disservice, and now Ezra sees how right she was. Thaddeus married Octavia Frost, a beautiful but ambitious woman, who quickly became a central figure in the family's plans. After Agatha's death, Ezra notices subtle shifts in their behavior: forgotten calls, canceled visits, and condescending smiles when he shared his thoughts on business. Things took a more troubling turn when they began eyeing his house with a more materialistic view. Octavia made comments about renovating the place to suit modern tastes, and during one visit, Ezra overheard a conversation between Thaddeus and Octavia that revealed their true intentions. They were already planning what to do with his estate. Thaddeus even suggested selling the house and buying something in Florida. Ezra was devastated. His family was no longer acting out of love or respect, but for the potential inheritance. Series of incidents followed, confirming his suspicions. Thaddeus and Octavia's behavior became more overt, photographing items in the house, studying his financial documents, and making plans for the future without consulting him. At a family dinner, Thaddeus suggested keeping the business afloat but not investing in its future. Ezra saw clearly how little his son understood the essence of the company, and he began to question whether Thaddeus deserved the inheritance. Ezra started to observe their behavior even more closely, realizing that they only called when they needed something, and his grandchildren visited reluctantly, glued to their phones. Ezra knew something had to change. One evening, Thaddeus and Octavia arrived unannounced, bringing an interior designer who began suggesting renovations to Ezra's home as if he were already gone. Ezra decided it was time to take control of his future. He reflected on Agatha's wisdom and how she always encouraged him to live life to the fullest. He realized it was time to make some hard decisions, not just about his business, but about his legacy. Ezra decided to change his will, ensuring that the fruits of his labor would go to someone who truly respected them: Willow Nightingale, a longtime employee who had proven his loyalty and understanding of the business. Thaddeus and Octavia would receive a small portion, but the bulk of his estate, including the house and company, would go to Willow. Ezra no longer wanted to leave his legacy to people who saw him as a source of inheritance, and he realized that Willow deserved it more than his own son. The next morning, Ezra contacted his lawyer, determined to make the changes official. He was prepared for the fallout, but he knew that this was the right decision for his future, his company, and his legacy. The time had come to move forward and make sure that Harding Industries would thrive under the leadership of someone who valued it the way Ezra had. Today I decided to visit my grandchildren. It had been a week since Thaddeus and Octavia's unpleasant visit with their designer, and I hoped that spending time with Ethan and Iris would lift my spirits a little. Despite the hard conversation, I still believed it was still possible to awaken a sincere attitude in children. Maybe I was just too old-fashioned and didn't understand today's teenagers. Their house was 20 minutes away from mine, a large modern mansion in an upscale neighborhood. I bought it for their 10th wedding anniversary when the company posted record profits. I remember Octavia choosing between 3 houses, and I went for the most expensive one, even though Agatha thought it was unnecessary. "You're spoiling them, Ezra." She said they should make their own success, but I wanted my son to have everything I didn't have when I was his age. I realize now that I've deprived him of an important lesson in overcoming adversity and the value of hard work. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed 3 cars in the driveway. Octavia's SUV, Thaddeus's sports car, and an unfamiliar sedan. Apparently, they had company. I wondered if I should postpone a visit, but I decided to call anyway. I'd warned them ahead of time. Octavia pinned the door, and a shadow of irritation flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a strained smile. "Ezra, we completely forgot you were going to stop by." There were 4 people sitting in the living room with glasses of wine, Thaddeus, and 3 strangers in business suits. Some papers were spread out on the coffee table. "Dad," Thaddeus came up to me, but he didn't hug me, just touched my shoulder lightly. "We were discussing a project. Do you mind waiting in the study? The kids are upstairs, so you can talk to them for a while." I nodded and went up to the 2nd floor. Ethan's room was empty, and there was music coming from Iris's room. I knocked, but there was no answer. I knocked louder. "Who's there?" My granddaughter asked irritably. "It's Grandpa," I answered. The door opened and he saw Iris with headphones around her neck. Behind her on the bed sat Ethan staring at his tablet. "Oh, hi," she said without much enthusiasm. "Mom didn't tell me you were coming." "I warned her last week," I replied, walking into the room. "How are you guys doing? How's school?" "Fine," Ira shrugged. "Uh-huh," Ethan mumbled, keeping his eyes on the screen. I sat down on the edge of the chair and looked around. Iris's room was decorated in light colors with many posters of music bands on the walls. On the shelves were expensive dolls Agatha and I had given her every Christmas. Now they were covered in a light layer of dust. I thought maybe we could go to that science museum that opened recently. I suggested it. "There's an interactive exhibit about space." "A museum?" Iris grimaced. "That's so boring. Besides, we have plans." "With friends today." "Yes, we were going to the mall," Ethan added, finally looking up from his tablet. "A new game store opened there. Maybe next time," I asked without much hope. "Maybe," Iris answered uncertainly. There was an awkward pause. I tried to think of something to talk about, but I felt hopelessly disconnected from their world. "What are you doing at school now?" I asked, stuffed. Ethan sighed. "Grandpa, is it true that you are going to renovate your old house?" This question took me by surprise. "Why would you think that?" "Mom told Meth that you and Dad were discussing renovations to make the house more modern," Iris explained. "She said we'd be able to have pool parties there soon." I felt anger rising inside me, but I tried to stay calm. "I don't have any plans to renovate," I answered in a steady voice, "and I don't remember discussing pool parties with your father." "Well, you will soon enough," Iris shrugged. "Mom's already shown us pictures of what it's going to look like. My room will be overlooking the garden." "Your room?" I asked. "Well, yes. When we move in, Ethan said as if it were a matter of course. Dad says there's no point in leaving such a big house empty when he hesitated, but Iris finished for him. When you're too old to take care of it. I looked at my grandchildren and didn't recognize them. Where were those sweet kids I used to take fishing? The ones I read books to before bedtime? Who hugged me every time I came over? I don't plan on being too old yet, I said, standing up. And my house doesn't need new owners. The children's faces stretched in surprise. Apparently, they hadn't expected such a reaction from their usually docile grandfather. We're just repeating what our parents say, Ethan muttered, clearly embarrassed. That's exactly the problem, I said, heading for the door. You're not thinking. With your head. When I got downstairs, I found that the business meeting was over and the strangers had left. Thaddeus and Octavia were sitting in the living room. Leaving already? Octavia asked. With ill-concealed relief. Are the kids doing something? They're going to the mall, I answered. But before that, they told me about your plans for my house. Thaddeus and Octavia exchanged quick glances. Dad, you misunderstood, Thaddeus began. We were just discussing hypotheticals. Planning for the future is fine. Planning my future without me is disrespectful, I said firmly. And teaching your kids that they can control other people's property is disrespectful. Ezra, don't be so dramatic. Octavia sighed. We just want to be ready to help you when the time comes. At your age, at my age, I interrupted. People are still capable of making their own decisions. And I've decided that I want you to stop sharing my skin while I'm alive. With those words, I headed for the exit. That caught up with me at the door. Dad, wait. You've got it all wrong. We're just worried about you. You living alone in this huge house dealing with the company? It's hard. Then help me, I said, looking him in the eye. Come to the office. Learn how the business you'll one day inherit works. Become my partner, not just waiting for an inheritance. Thaddeus hesitated. I saw something like guilt flicker in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. Dad, you know I have. My own projects. Plus, your company, it's a little outdated in the way it's run. I'd change a lot of things if I came here and you don't like change. Give it a try. I suggested it. Come by the office tomorrow. I'll show you around, explain everything. If your ideas make sense, I'm willing to consider them. He had an expression on his face that I knew well from his childhood. A mixture of annoyance and reluctance to do what his parents suggested. I have an important meeting tomorrow, he replied. Maybe next week. Then any day next week, I insisted. You choose. I'll look at my calendar and let you know, Thaddeus replied evasively. We both knew he wouldn't call. Already in the car, I felt tired, not physically, but emotionally. I drove home and thought about how everything had gone wrong. Where had I gone wrong with my parenting? When did Thaddeus turn into Eamon who's just waiting for me to die so he can get his inheritance? At home, I dialed the number of Winston Price, my old friend and business partner. We met 40 years ago when I first started the business, and we've kept in touch ever since. Though we've seen each other rarely in recent years, he has knee problems and doesn't like to leave the house. Ezra. His husky voice came through the phone. What a surprise. Are you still live, you old geyser? I smiled involuntarily. Winston had always been blunt at the point of rudeness, but that was why I appreciated him. I'm hanging in there, I answered. How are your knees? Still shitty, he grinned. But my head's working, and thank goodness for that. To what do I owe the call? Did you decide to visit an old friend? If you don't mind, I said, I need some advice. That's news to me. Ezra Harding wants advice, he laughed. Come, of course. Just bring something to drink. My doctor has forbidden alcohol, so I don't have a drop at home. An hour later, I was sitting in Winston's living room, asmal but cozy room, in his modest house on the outskirts of town. Unlike me, Winston had never chased wealth. He ran a small transportation company that hauled freight for my firm and was quite a accountant with a steady average income. "So, what's up?" he asked, pouring U.S. whiskey. "From the look on your face, it's serious." I told him everything about Thaddeus and Octavia's behavior, about the talk behind my back, about the plans for my house, about my grandchildren repeating what their prince said. Winston listened without interrupting, only occasionally humming Gore. Shaking his head. "What do you think you're going to do?" He asked me when I was done. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's why I came to see you. You've always been more decisive." Winston sipped his whiskey and looked out the window thoughtfully. "You know, Ezra, he always told you were too soft on your son. You gave him everything on a silver platter, and that's the way people are. They don't appreciate what they get. Without effort." "I know," he sighed. "Agatha used to say that too. She was a smart woman." Winston nodded. "Too bad you didn't listen to her then. But it's not a question of education now. Thaddeus is 50 years old and you can re-educate him. It's about what you do with what you've got." "What's that?" "Your son and his wife are clearly expecting an inheritance. They've already planned how they're going to spend your money and how they're going to use your house. The question is, do they deserve it?" I remained silent, twirling my whiskey glass in my hands. "Listen," Winston continued, "I've known you almost all my life. You're an honest man who always pays his bills. Now suppose Thaddeus is the bill life has given you. You've already paid it. You've given him an education, a home, a job. You've done your duty as a parent. Now you're free to decide what to do with your fortune." "But he's my only son," I objected. "Who else should I leave my inheritance to?" Winston smiled slightly. "Who says you have to leave it to someone else in the family? It's your money, your house, your business. You can dispose of it however you want." "What do you mean?" "Well, for example, you have employees who really appreciate the company and understand how it works, right? Maybe someone who deserves it more than Thaddeus," I wondered. The image of Willow Nightingale, my deputy, who had been with the company for 20 years, came to mind. He'd started out as a technician and had risen to a management position solely because of his talent and hard work. Willow understood business as well as I did, maybe even better. "There is one person," I said slowly, "Willow Nightingale. Heckled run the company as well as I could. You see," Winston slapped his palm on the arm of his chair, "you have options. You don't have to follow tradition and leave everything to your son just because he's your son, especially if he doesn't appreciate what he gets. Thaddeus will be furious." It pointed out. "Do you care?" Winston shrugged. "You're not watching that rage from the other side of the world. Besides, if he loves you only for the inheritance, it's not true love. If he loves you for real, he'll forgive you." I was silent, thinking about his words. There was truth in them, though bitter. "You know," Winston went on, "when Maya Leonard died, I rethought a lot of things. Life is too short to waste it on people who don't appreciate you. Surround yourself with people who see you as a person, not as a wallet or a burden." "That's easy to say," I sighed, "but this is my family." "Family isn't just blood," Winston countered. "Family is the people who treat you with love and respect. Think about that, Ezra, and also," he paused, "don't wait too long to make a decision. At our age, time is our most precious resource." We talked for a few more hours. Winston talked about his children, his 3 daughters, who had moved to different cities but called and visited regularly. About his grandchildren who sent him drawings and letters. About how he divided his small fortune among them while he was still alive, leaving only the bare minimum for himself. "I saw their joy," he said. "It's better than leaving everything behind and not seeing how they will use it. As he said goodbye, Winston shook my hand firmly. Don't let them treat you like a doormat, Ezra. You deserve respect. And remember, what you've earned through your labor belongs to you alone. You have every right to use it as you see fit. All the way home, I thought about our conversation. What if Winston's right? What if I really am free to decide who to leave? The fruits of my labor, too? The thought both terrified and excited me at the same time. His words, "Don't wait too long," rattled around in me mind. Maybe it was time to act. Yesterday, Thaddeus called out of the blue. Usually he only contacted me when he did something, but this time his voice sounded almost friendly. "Dad, Octavia and I want to invite you to dinner this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just a family night out." I was wary. 12 weeks had passed since our last conversation and visit to Winston's, and Thaddeus had never once mentioned my offer to come to the office. The sudden invitation to dinner seemed suspicious. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "Need an excuse to see your father." There was a hint of irritation in his voice. "Octavia thinks we should hang out more as a family. There will be children, no strangers." "Okay," I agreed after a pause. "What time? 7 o'clock? And Dad?" He hesitated for a second. "I want to discuss something important about the company." "That's it." I was right. There was an ulterior motive behind the invitation. "I'm listening." "No, I'd rather do it in person." "Nothing urgent, just an idea I'd like to discuss with you." All day before dinner, I wondered what Thaddeus was up to. Over the past month, I had been following the company's affairs more closely, visiting the office more often, talking to the employees. Perhaps Thaddeus had noticed my activity and was concerned. Saturday night, I wore my best suit, a navy blue tailored suit with a subtle pinstripe. Agatha always said it made me look younger. I put on the cufflinks she'd given me for my 40th birthday. Simple silver squares with flecks of malachite. I wanted to look presentable in case there was a serious business conversation to be had. Thaddeus's house was all lit up when it pulled up. Octavia opened the door with a wide smile like she was really happy to see me. "Ezra, how wonderful of you to come." She kissed me on the cheek, leaving a trace of lipstick. "Come on in." Everyone's already in the living room. Everyone turned out to be just Thaddeus and the kids. Ethan and Iris were sitting on the couch staring at their phones. They barely looked up when I walked in. "Hello," I said. "It's good to see you." "Hi, Grandpa," Iris mumbled, not looking away from the screen. Thaddeus came up to meet me. "Dad, you look great." He patted me on the shoulder. "Would you like a drink? Whiskey or maybe a martini?" "Whiskey," I said, "on the rocks." He headed for the bar, but Octavia was working around me, settling me into a chair, putting a pillow under my back like I was a frail old man. "How are you feeling, Ezra?" she asked with exaggerated concern. "You look alert. Dr. Morrison said your vitals are good for your age. Are you in touch with my cardiologist?" I wondered. "Oh, we met Bykent at a charity event last month." She waved her hand. "He brought you up when he found out I was your daughter-in-law." I doubted Dr. Morrison would discuss my health with Octavia, but I decided not to argue. Thaddeus returned with the drinks and we moved to the table. The dinner was unusually fine. Octavia served oysters as an appetizer, then duck breast with cherry sauce, and finally chocolate fondant with ice cream. Everything was professionally prepared, no doubt ordered from their restaurant. Thaddeus was pouring expensive wine that I knew cost at least $200 a bottle. All this ostentatious luxury only heightened my suspicions. The conversation at the table was strained. Octavia asked me about my health, about the house, about whether it was hard for me to manage such a large household. That chimed in with occasional remarks about how important it was at a certain age to think about the future. The children were silent, occasionally glancing over at their parents. After dessert, Octavia sent Ethan and Iris upstairs and brought coffee and brandy. "So," I said when it was just the three of us, "is there something you wanted to discuss about the company, Thaddeus?" He exchanged a glance with Octavia and straightened up as if preparing for an important announcement. "Yes, Papa, I've been thinking a lot about the future of Harding Industries, and I've come to the conclusion that we need a change." "What kind of change?" "Strategic." He paused. "I believe we should consider selling Fee Company." I felt my heart skip a beat. A sale. The company I'd spent 50 years building. "Dad, you have to understand," Thaddeus said in that tone you used to explain the obvious to a child. "The market is changing. Small and medium-sized equipment suppliers are being displaced by large corporations. While Harding Industries is still afloat, we could get a good price." "Get a good price?" I repeated slowly. "And then what?" 500 people lose their jobs." "Not necessarily," Octavia intervened. "The new owners can keep some of the staff. Of course, there will be optimization, but it's a normal business process." "Optimization?" I chuckled. "That's a nice word for mass layoffs." Ezra, barrelistic. Octavia stepped forward. "You're 78 years old. How much longer are you going to be able to run this company?" And Thaddeus, with all due respect, isn't ready to take on that kind of responsibility. "Thank you for your candor, dear," Thaddeus said dryly. "I'm just telling the truth," she parried. "You said yourself that you didn't want to waste your life with this outdated company." I looked at them and couldn't believe my ears. They weren't just planning to get rid of my legacy. They were discussing it right in front of me as if my opinion meant nothing. "What do you plan to do with the money from the sale?" I asked, trying to speak calmly. "Well," Thaddeus cheered up, "I have a few ideas for startups, plus real estate investments. Octavia has long dreamed of a house in Florida. What about the employees who've been with the company for decades? Willow Nightingale, who's devoted 20 years of her life to Harding Industries." "Willow will get a nice payoff," Thaddeus shrugged. "He'll find another job. He's smart." I stayed silent, trying to control my anger. This was the final proof of how far my son had strayed from the values I tried to teach him. "Harding Industries isn't for sale," I finally said. "Not now, not in the future." Thaddeus sighed as if he'd expected that answer. "Dad, I understand your attachment to the company, but you have to think about the future. Your family, Octavia and me, grandchildren." "I am thinking about the future," I replied. "The future of the 500 people who depend on me. The future of the customers who have trusted us for decades. The reputation I've spent a lifetime building." "Reputation." Octavia snorted. "Who needs it in the 21st century? Only money matters, Ezra. Everything else is sentimental nonsense." Those words struck a chord with me. Sentimental nonsense. I said it again. Honesty, integrity, being true to one's word. Those are nonsense to you. "Don't twist my words," she said. "I'm talking about business. Everyone sells and buys companies today. It's normal, not form." I cut her off. "Harding Industries isn't just a business. It's my life's work, my legacy." "Legacy?" Octavia didn't hide her irritation. "That's what it is. Are you afraid that no one will remember the name of Ezra Harding when you're gone?" "Octavia?" Thaddeus said warningly, but she didn't stop. "Tell me honestly, Ezra." She leaned across the table to me. "You just can't stand the idea that your time has passed, that the world has moved on, that younger people think differently." I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm well aware that the world is changing, but there are some things that remain the same. Respect for your elders, gratitude for what you've been given, caring for those who depend on you." "Oh, don't start your moralizing." She rolled her eyes. "In my day, young people respected their elders. You know what I say? Maybe older people don't always deserve respect just because they're older. Octavia Thaddeus tried to intervene again, but she was unstoppable. Do y'all think we should tiptoe around you because you built some company? Because you have money. Money that will still have when you die. That's enough, Thaddeus shouted. But it was too late, Dad, so that's what this is all about, I said slowly. You're just waiting for me to die so you can have my fortune. Don't be silly, Dad, Thaddeus began, but I interrupted him. Listen to your wife, son. At least she's honest. I stood up from the table, feeling my hands shaking with anger. The company is not for sale, and as long as I'm alive, it will operate as I see fit. Octavia jumped up too, her face contorted with anger. You old egotist, she shouted, thinking on life yourself, about your legacy. Have you thought about us? About how we live while you sit in your big house and play boss? Octavia, stop it. Thaddeus tried to calm her down, but she pushed his hand away. No, let her know. Let him know we're tired of waiting. Tired of pretending that we're interested in his senile stories, his outdated views on business. Tired of pretending we don't want his money. At least now I know the truth, I said, heading for the door. Yes, you do, she shouted after me. You know what I think of you? Of your business. Of your stupid house that you refuse to sell or even renovate. I stopped and turned around. My house is none of your business, Octavia. Not now, not in the future. It doesn't concern you? She laughed a high, almost hysterical laugh. Who do you think will live in it when you're gone? Certainly not the ghost of your precious Agatha. The mention of my late wife's name was the last straw. I felt a wave of rage up inside me that I had never felt before. You will never live in my house, I said quietly but firmly. Never. Octavia stepped close to me, her face contorted with anger. Don't be so sure of that, old man. Thaddeus is your only heir. Everything you have will be ours, and the first thing we'll do is tear down those ugly Victorian panels and throw away all those dusty pictures. I looked at her and didn't recognize the woman who had been married to my son for 20 years. Had she always been like this and I just hadn't noticed? You're wrong, Octavia, I said. I can change my will at any time, and believe me, after tonight, I have every reason to do so. For a moment there was fear in her eyes. But then she laughed. Again, to whom would you leave your fortune? You have no one but us. To your cats or maybe to that pathetic sycophant, Willow? It's my business, I said, and I'll solve it without your advice. She swung around and slapped me across the face. The slap was sudden and hard. I even staggered. Octavia! Thaddeus shouted, but there was more surprise than outrage in his voice. I pressed my palm to my burning cheek and looked at my son. He stood to the side, not moving from his seat, not trying to intervene. And then, and this was the worst part, he grinned. A short, barely noticeable grin, but I saw it. Myeon-sun was laughing at his wife hitting his father. At that moment, something snapped inside me. The last thread connecting me to these people, I inertially continued to think of as family. You're laughing, I said, looking at Thaddeus. Your wife beats your father and you're laughing. Dad, I didn't, he started. But I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't bother, I got it. I turned and walked out of the room. Out of the house without looking back. They yelled something after me, but I didn't listen. Getting in my car, I just sat there for a few minutes without starting the engine, trying to realize what had happened. My daughter-in-law slapped me. My son laughed at me. All because of money. Money I had earned with my labor, my sweat, my sleepless nights, the risks I took when they weren't even born yet. I started the car and drove home, feeling strangely calm. The decision I'd been putting off for weeks now seemed crystal clear. No more doubts, no more internal struggle. The next morning, I called Marcus Brinksley, my lawyer. It was a Sunday afternoon, but the case was urgent. "Marcus, I apologize for disturbing you on your day off," I said when he answered, "but I need to change my will right away." "Is something wrong, Ezra?" There was concern in his voice. Marcus had known me for almost 30 years and understood that I wouldn't call him on a Sunday without a good reason. "Let's just say I finally saw the true colors of some of my family members," I answered. "Can I come to your place tomorrow morning?" "Sure. I'll be in Theophis at 9. The next day, I was at his place exactly at the appointed time. Marcus met me in his office, a spacious room overlooking the city park. He weighs about 15 years younger than me, but he was already starting to gray. We'd met when he was still an aspiring lawyer, and we'd trusted each other ever since. "So, Ezra," he said when we sat down, "what can I do for you?" I told him everything. The conversation with Winston, Thaddeus, and Octavius Bevier, the unfortunate dinner, and the slap. He listened attentively, sometimes making notes. "I want to change the will completely," I said when I had finished. "Thaddeus must not get the company or the house, I understand." Marcus nodded. "But do you realize that would cause a serious conflict? Thaddeus Gold contests the will, claiming you were incapacitated or coerced." "Let him tree," I shrugged. "You know, I'm of sound mind, and there are plenty of witnesses to my sanity. The company employees, the clients I meet with weekly." "Okay. Hamed." Another note. "Who do you want to leave your assets to?" "The company and the house to Willow Nightingale," I answered without hesitation. "He's been with me for 20 years, knows the business inside out, and most importantly, shares my values. He'll keep Harding Industries, the way I built it, and personal savings, investments. I've been thinking a small amount, say 50,000 to Thaddeus. I don't want him to be able to say I've completely disinherited him. The rest, I paused out the rest of it to Willow, too. He deserves it more than anyone else." Marcus looked at me studyingly. "Are you sure, Ezra? This is a big decision." "I've never been so sure in my life," I answered firmly. "I want my legacy to go to someone who values it, someone who will continue what I started, not destroy it at the first opportunity." He nodded and began the paperwork. The process took several hours. There were many details to take into account so that the new will be legally flawless and could not be challenged. When everything was ready, I signed several copies in the presence of 2 witnesses from Marcus' law firm. "That's it," Marcus said as he sealed the documents. "Your company and house are now officially destined for Willow Nightingale. Do you want to let him know it?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Let it be a surprise for everyone." As I left Marcus's office, I felt unusually light. It was as if the weight that had been weighing on me for months was finally gone. I had made a decision, and it was the right one. Now I had to move on with my life and maybe make a few more changes, but that's another story. After visiting Marcus and changing my will, something changed in me. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders for years. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe freely. The decision was made. The papers were signed, and now I could move on. The first thing I did was mute my phone. That called several times a day. At first, I didn't answer. Then I stopped noticing the calls altogether. After a week, he started coming to the house, but I asked the housekeeper to tell him I wasn't there. One day, she handed me a note from him. "Dad, we need to talk. What happened was a terrible mistake. Octavia hasn't been herself lately. Please give us a chance to explain." I crumpled the note and threw it away. There was nothing to explain. The slape in my son's chuckle told me more than any words could. At the office, I started spending more time with Willow Nightingale. I talked to him mostly about work-related matters before, but now I wanted to know him better as a person. After all, he was going to be the keeper of my life's work. Willow was 30 years younger than me, a tall, thin man with alert gray eyes and prominently graying temples. He joined the company 20 years ago as a technician and, through hard work and intelligence, had risen to the position of deputy director. I'd always appreciated him for his professionalism, but only now was I beginning to notice his human qualities, kindness, tact, a sense of humor. "Willow," I said one day, inviting him into my office, "I have an unusual favor to ask of you. Could you show me how our new warehouse management system works? I know it's not your job, but I'd like to understand the process from the inside." He looked at me in surprise. "Of course, Mr. Harding, but shouldn't Thaddeus be doing this? He's the vice president of operations after all." "Thaddeus is busy with other projects," I said evasively. "Besides, you're better at the practical aspects of business." Willow blushed slightly at the compliment. "Thank you for your confidence. I'd be happy to show you around." We spent the whole day in the warehouse. Willow enthusiastically explained how the new system worked, introduced me to the employees, and showed me how theft processes were optimized. I could see the respect in which the workers treated him. They asked him questions, gave him advice, joked with him. It was the kind of respect that you can't buy with money or a job title. It is earned through years of honest work and treating people fairly. At the end of the day, as we were heading back to the office, Willa suddenly asked, "Mr. Harding, may I ask a personal question?" "Sure. Why are you suddenly interested in warehouse operations? It's not like you." I smiled at his powers of observation. "Let's just say, Willow, I'm reprioritizing. I want to make sure the company's in good hands." "Are you planning on retiring?" There was concern in his voice. "Not anytime soon," I reassured him. "But we have to think about the future. The company has to live on even when I'm gone." "I understand." He nodded. "If you need any help with succession planning, I'm always available." "Thank you, Willow. I appreciate it." In the weeks that followed, I began to systematically introduce him to all aspects of running the company: finance, marketing, key account management. Technically, it looked like preparation for his empowerment, but in reality, I was preparing him for his role as the future owner of Harding Industries. Willow picked up on everything on the fly. He asked the right questions, offered interesting solutions, and sometimes even argued with me respectfully but firmly. I became more and more convinced that I had made the right choice. One day, while reviewing the financial statements, I noticed the name of the chief accountant of our largest client, D. Fernsby. "Who's D. Fernsby?" I asked Willow. "They used to have a different accountant, I think." "Doris Fernsby," he replied. "She's been working there for about a year. Very competent, actually. Thanks to her, we were able to optimize our supply chain and save both companies a lot of money." "Interesting," I said thoughtfully. "Maybe we should invite her to lunch to discuss further cooperation." Willow looked at me in surprise. "Usually, the sales department does that. Sometimes it's good to break protocol." I smiled. "Please, organize it." 2 days later, I was sitting in a restaurant across from Doris Fernsby, an elegant woman of my age with short gray hair and lively brown eyes. She held herself with dignity, talking business, occasionally instilling a subtle joke. I found myself thinking that it was a long time since I had met such an interesting companion. "So, Mr. Harding," she said when we had finished discussing business, "why did you really want to meet? It's unlikely that the president of a company personally discusses deliveries with a client's accountant." I laughed. "You're very perceptive, Mrs. Fernsby." "Miss," she corrected. "I've never been married." "And please call me Doris." "Only if you call him Ezra," I suggested. "As for your question, I confess I just wanted to meet the man who's managed to optimize our partnership so intelligently." "Flattery doesn't suit you, Ezra," she smiled. "But I'll take the compliment." Wetticked for another 2 hours, forgetting about the business part of the meeting. Doris told me that she'd worked as an accountant all her life, starting her career in the era of paperwork. She loved opera, traveling, and detective novels. Lived alone in a small apartment with a cat named Chopin. Why didn't you ever get married? I asked, if you didn't think the question is indelicate. I won't, she looked thoughtfully out the window. I just never met someone I wanted to spend my life with. I was in love a couple times, but it didn't work out. And then work career. You know how it is. I know. I nodded. I was lucky to have Agatha. We were together for 47 years. How long ago did she leave? 6 years ago. Cancer. Doris touched my arm sympathetically. I'm sorry. It must have been hard. Yeah, I said quietly. But she taught me to appreciate every day, to live life to the fullest while I could. A wise woman, Doris smiled. I wish I'd known her. Ya would have been friends, I said confidently. You have a lot in common. After that lunch, we began to meet. Regularly. First under the pretext of discussing business matters, then just for fun. We went to the opera, to museums, just strolling in the park. Doris was intelligent, educated, and had a subtle sense of humor. Next to her, I did not feel like an old widower, but just a man enjoying the company of an interesting woman. One day, I invited her to my house for dinner. She spent a long time walking through the rooms, looking at paintings, books, photographs. You have a beautiful home, Ezra, she said. It has a sense of history, of character. Thank you. I was touched by her words. Agatha and I spent years designing this place. Every single thing. Here has a story. You can feel it, she nodded. A whose that is lived in, not just existed in. Over dinner, I told her about the conflict with my son and daughter-in-law, the slap, my decision to change my will. I don't know why I decided to share it. Perhaps I just needed understanding. Doris listened attentively without interrupting. Well? She said when I finished, it sounds like you've made a difficult but good decision. Sometimes you have to let go of people who don't appreciate you, even if it's family. You don't think I'm being cruel? I asked. Thaddeus is Mindley's son after all. Cruel? She shook her head. No, Ezra. Cruel is punching an old man in the face. Cruel is laughing at your own father's humiliation. Your rage is protecting yourself and your legacy from people who don't deserve it. Her words were a balm to my soul. For the first time, someone fully supported my decision without reservations or doubts. Thank you, Doris, I said quietly. You have no idea how much your understanding means to me. She smiled and squeezed my hand lightly. You're welcome. She stayed at my place that night. We just talked until deep into the night and then fell asleep in the chairs by the fireplace like old friends. In the morning, I made breakfast and we ate pancakes on the veranda, watching the birds in the garden. It felt so natural, so easy, like we'd known each other all our lives. Meanwhile, at work, I continued to prepare Willow for her future role. We spent a lot of time together, discussing strategic issues, meeting with key clients. I was introducing him to important people in the industry, bringing him into circles where I'd only ever appeared before. Gradually, the company began to notice these changes. There were rumors that I was grooming Willow to be my successor. Thaddeus had heard about it. Of course, he was still listed as vice president, but he was effectively removed from major decisions. When I arrived at the office one morning, the receptionist told me that Thaddeus was waiting for me in the reception area. He's been here for 2 hours, she added in a whisper. He said he wouldn't leave until he talked to you. I sighed. It was bound to happen sooner or later. All right, send him in. Thaddeus looked gaunt and sleep-deprived. His usually immaculate tessuit was wrinkled, and he had a razor cut on his cheek. Dad, he began without preamble. What's going on? Why are you avoiding? And me? Why aren't you answering your cell phone? Why are you putting Willow in charge of jobs I should be doing? I looked at him calmly. You know the answers to all of those questions yourself, Thaddeus. Because of the other night, he ran his hand nervously through his hair. Dad, it was a mistake. Octavia hasn't been herself lately. Work problem stress. She didn't mean to hurt you. She slapped me, I said dryly. And Yolad. I didn't laugh, he exclaimed. I was shocked. It was a nervous laugh if you saw anything at all. I've seen enough, I replied. And it's not just slap. It's about the way you both treat me, my home, my life's work. You're waiting for me to die. So you can inherit. That turned pale. What do you mean, Bithit? I have changed my will, I replied calmly. Neither you nor Octavia will get company or the house anymore. What? He jumped to his feet. You can't do this. I am your son, your only heir. Yes, I can. I remained unperturbed. Andy already have? To whom? His voice shook with rage. Who did? You leave everything, To? That sycophant Willow? I didn't say anything, but my face must have given away the answer. Willow? Thaddeus laughed disbelievingly. You left everything to Willow? To a person who has nothing to do with you, who just works. For you for a paycheck, to a man who respects me and appreciates what I've created. I countered. A man who isn't waiting for me to die so I can sell off everything I've built. Thaddeus collapsed back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. Papa, you don't understand. We never wanted to hurt you. We were thinking about the future. Your future, I clarified. Not mine, not the future of the company or the employees. He looked up at me with a look of despair. It's Octavia, he said quietly. She's putting pressure on me. Always talking about money, about the house, about what we could do with your inheritance. I just wanted her to be happy. So you let her insult me? Plan me death behind my back? I didn't know she'd go that far. He shook his head. Believe me, I was just as shocked as you were. I sighed. Maybe he really was trying to make things right in his own way, but it was too late. Thaddeus, I said more gently, I didn't cut you out of the will completely. You'll get a certain amount of money, but the company and the house will go to Willow. That's my final decision. After we talked, it was like Thaddeus and Octavia decided to take me by force. They called several times a day, came unannounced, sent flowers and gifts. Octavia even sent a letter of apology, formal, cold, obviously written at Thaddeus's insistence. I didn't return the calls, didn't receive them at home, returned the gifts. I tore up Octavia's letter before I finished it. They had made their choice long ago, and now, when they learned of the new will, they were trying their best to recover their lost inheritance, but it was too late. One day, they caught me outside my office. I was leaving after a day of work, and suddenly, I saw them standing by my car. Octavia was dressed modestly without her usual provocative makeup. Thaddeus was holding some kind of package. Dad, he began. Stepping forward, we just want to talk. 5 minutes, no more. I sighed. It was bound to happen sooner or later. 5 minutes, I agreed. Here in the parking lot, Mr. Harding. Octavia stepped forward. I want to personally apologize for my behavior. It was inexcusable. I was out of my mind from stress, from problems, but that's no excuse. I did a terrible thing and I deeply regret it. Her voice sounded sincere, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. I couldn't see any remorse in them, only fear of losing the money. We brought you a present. Thaddeus held out a package. It's a scrapbook of family photos. I found a lot of old pictures of you, Mom, me as a kid. I thought you might like it. I didn't take it. Thaddeus, Octavia, I said calmly. I appreciate your visit, but my decision will not change. Neither apologies nor gifts will regain my trust. But we are family, Thaddeus exclaimed. Doesn't that mean anything? Family isn't just blood. I answered in Winston's words. Family is respect, support, love, all of which I don't see in your relationship with me. It's been 6 months since I changed my will. 6 months of a new life with no room for the old frustrations and resentments. I was fully immersed in my work with Willow, preparing him for his future role as owner of the company, and in my relationship with Doris, which was growing deeper and more meaningful every day. Doris often stayed with me, and sometimes I slept over in her modest but cozy apartment. We went to the theater, to concerts, to restaurants. We traveled on weekends to neighboring towns, discovering small museums and galleries that are not written about in guidebooks. I felt younger and happier than I had in all the years since Agatha's death. Thaddeus and Octavia never gave up trying to win back my affection. They called regularly, sent gifts, tried to arrange chance meetings, but I remained adamant. The wound inflicted by them was too deep to be healed by apologies and gifts. My 80th birthday was approaching. I'd never given it much thought, but Doris insisted on celebrating it properly. 80 years isn't just an anniversary, Ezra, she said. It's a milestone. No Deverian can live to be that age in good health and good judgment. I agreed to Asmal reception, but on one condition: I wanted to use the occasion to make my decision about the inheritance official. No more secrecy and mystery. Let everyone know who gets Harding Industries in my house. Are you sure? Doris asked me when I shared this plan with her. It might spoil the party. On the contrary, I replied, it will free me from the last shackles of the past. You want to start my 9th decade without the burden of unspoken words. She nodded understandingly. In that case, you need to plan everything so that no one can ruin your day. Including Thaddeus and Octavia, we worked out a detailed plan. Their reception was to be held at my house on Saturday from lunchtime until late afternoon. There would be few guests, just my closest friends, co-workers, Willow and his wife, and of course, Thaddeus and his family. After dinner, when everyone was in a good mood, I planned to make an announcement. I called Thaddeus a week before the event. "Hi, son," I said when he picked up the phone. "I'm having a reception next Saturday in honor of my 80th birthday. I'd love to see you, Octavia, and the kids." There was silence on the other end of the line. Apparently, my call had taken him by surprise. He was usually the one who initiated communication in the last few months. "Of course, Dad," Heffinley answered. "We'll definitely come. Do you need anything?" "Just good cheer," I said. "Everything else is already organized." On the day of the reception,